Ancient Americas is a history YouTuber specializing in the pre-Columbian history of North and South America. He has 209,000 subscribers as of the date of writing this script, the 7th of September 2024, and has produced 44 videos since 2019. As a channel specializing in a specific history niche, Ancient Americas is well positioned to produce deep, long-form analysis of topics related to his subject area, though he occasionally produces short-form content. During the time that I've been watching Ancient America's channel, I've been impressed by the integrity of his research, the depth of his analysis, and the fact that he cites the sources he has used for each video, linking to a Google document which lists them in full. I've noticed that Ancient Americas uses a wide range of sources, from primary source historical documents to secondary and tertiary sources, and he approaches his research from a multidisciplinary perspective, citing not only historical sources and analysis, but also relevant archaeological studies and scientific papers. I was interested in knowing more about his thorough research methodology, so I asked him for an interview, and he graciously agreed. Does Ancient Americas do good research? In my view, yes, he does, and this interview confirms it. Thank you so much for agreeing to this collaboration. I really appreciate you taking your time to do this. Could you please introduce yourself and your channel?
Thanks for having me here. I'm Pete, and I'm the creator of the Ancient Americas channel, which is a YouTube channel that explores the history of pre-Columbian and contact periods of North and South America.
Could you tell me just briefly how you became interested in this particular field?
So I got interested in ancient history in North and South America probably about 7 years ago or so. And even before then, I watched a lot of educational and history content on YouTube, and there just weren't any that I was aware of at the time that discussed it. I wanted to learn more. And yeah, slowly started reading books, wanted to share that with people, and created the channel.
That sounds a lot like pretty much everybody else that I've interviewed. It starts as a passion project, and then you develop your skills and your knowledge later. And then you think, wow, I'm actually getting pretty good at this. And you gradually expand your reach and you improve your process and you start becoming more rigorous in your research methods and you start raising the standard for your own content. And on that point, moving to question two, can you describe your research method and what quality control measures you take for your videos?
So I'm probably a little bit different than most of the other history tuber channels and creators that you're interviewing because I tend to rely a bit more on archaeological than historical sources. Now, historical sources do still play an important part in my research because accounts of different cultures at contact or like ethnographies or chronicles are very important to understanding these ancient cultures. To that end, I rely on books and articles written by archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians to assemble a picture of whatever I'm studying and to kind of figure out what the scholarly consensus is. Those authors are very important because, first of all, a lot of those primary accounts might be written in Spanish or Portuguese, which are not my first languages, and I have only a limited ability with them. And these were documents that were written hundreds of years ago with, like older versions of the language. So I rely on a lot of their help to kind of, interpret what's going on in the text. I also do my best to vet authors that I read and make sure that, they're credentialed, that they've written extensively on the topic, and that they're not hacks or quacks or anything. Once I've done all my research, I'll kind of outline my script, write a first draft, have it checked by other people, make the necessary revisions, and then write the final draft. Now, after the draft is created, I go through the entire draft and I basically figure out where I'm going to need all my visual assets, all my images, all my maps, make a list of that, and then I go through and gather all those visual assets. Even before I record the script, I'll make sure that all that's done. Now, while I don't put citations in my scripts or my videos, I do make sure that I have a bibliography of all my sources, and that also includes the images and the sound files that I'll use. Basically, my goal is I want to make sure that anybody who watches one of my videos can see where I got my information and where I got my visual material so that they could theoretically remake the video. To that end, I've never used AI generated images in a video, or at least not knowingly. But if I ever did, I would note in the bibliography that that specific image was AI generated, because obviously someone could not, might not be able to regenerate that image on their own.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that very detailed description of your work. I was particularly interested to notice that you mentioned you, in the process of creating your script, you share it with other people for a second opinion and you seek some third-party advice. This is something I do quite frequently. It's something I've done in particular on subjects when I know that I am way out of my academic depth and my own personal knowledge comfort zone. For example, when I was making a video on the Ishango and Lubombo bones, which are very old bones with marking on them, which seem to be some kind of, very likely some kind of mathematical notation. And I wanted to know if there was any scholarly consensus among mathematicians as to their interpretation. So I went on Reddit to one of the more reputable subreddits, like there was Ask Mathematician or something like that. I find r Ask Mathematicians, r Ask Historians, and a couple of others, which are literally populated by identifiable professionals. Really, really useful for that, like R Anthropology. And I asked them questions and said, look, I don't know if there's a consensus about this. I've read a lot of articles, but there's obviously a lot of debate. How do we know? Is there a way of knowing? And some people said, look, frankly, there's no way of knowing exactly how these were used. We have to be honest about that. We don't have enough context, but we do have similar artifacts in different places where there are small markings grouped together which look like tally marks or something. So at least we could say that they look like tally marks. Whether they were used for anything more complex is possible, but we just don't have any firm indication of that because we don't have any other material culture which supports that. But so they were very conservative, obviously, and cautious in their interpretations, which was great. And I found other sources like, for example, r Ask Historians, which is actually recommended by the American Historical Association, which has collaborated with r Ask Historians a few times because they have actually identifiable professional historians there who can help you out with questions, which is really great. And also, I think it's r Ask Anthropology. They do a really good job, again, of identifiable professionals commenting on issues. They're always getting questions, of course, about books like Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, this kind of thing. So I make a point of consulting professional knowledge when I can and when I feel it's particularly important, especially when I know I'm out of my depth. And yeah, this obviously increases the time that you take for your research, but I think it's really important, partly from the perspective of making sure that you're getting information that you otherwise wouldn't have, and you're getting much more reliable information that you can find yourself. It's not a question of people doing the work for you either. I mean, you credit your sources always. And you let people know that this is what you've done. And I think it's just really important that if you want to do this seriously, that you are always aware of what you don't know. I think one issue with some history channels is that they don't know what they don't know, or they're just not particularly concerned about what they don't know, and they take the easy way out, and their focus is actually on making a video rather than actually representing the history. So I was very interested to hear that you actually said that, because this is something I think that a lot of people overlook. Yeah, sure, some of us are producing our own videos, but we are actively seeking advice from people who we know are much more knowledgeable. And I think that also helps keep you humble and make sure that you can, I mean, I like to field test I have field tested quite a lot of my material on places like with asking questions on r Ask Historians, or the mathematics one, or the anthropology one, or r Bad History, for some kind of peer review using my scripts before or after I actually publish them, to see if they stand up to a bit of informed scrutiny from people. And I think that's really healthy because it helps keep me honest, and it helps also put a little bit of a check on my own assessment of my abilities, because when you do this after a while, you get pretty confident and you think that you're doing a good job, you're getting some subscribers, but that's not necessarily an indicator of your quality. And I think it's always useful to have that check. That's one of the reasons why I like the history Slack group, where people do ask questions and collaborate and ask for sources and advice and reveal their knowledge gaps and say, look, I really need some help with that. I think it's really good to see history YouTube channels collaborating in that way.
It's funny that you mentioned the Ask Historians subreddit, because I've gotten some phenomenal help from that subreddit. I've been pointed to specific users on there who are like specialists in a certain topic. I mean, the last episode I did was on ancient West Mexico, and just early on in the research process, a good friend and friend of the channel and assistant pointed me to one of the users who specialized in that area, so he was able to point me to some good sources. Once I had the script, he was able to kind of go through, check that, kind of point out any gaps, or make sure that everything in there was consistent, was up to date. So yeah, that subreddit is so helpful. And it's funny, there's also another really good feature of that subreddit. They have a book list of like all these books you can read on different topics, different periods of history, different places. And if people ever ask me like, oh, like where can I find good books about like Mesoamerica, or good books about the Maya or the Aztecs, I'm like, you want to go to this book list here. Like this will have really good sources that have been vetted by experts on the topics. Like start there. That list is so helpful.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I've used that
Mm-hmm.
list myself, and this is actually something that I have mentioned on my own channel. I make use of academic bibliographies, particularly academic annotated bibliographies, such as you can find on Cambridge website, for example, and on my own website, which is the site I use to post my own references because they're way too long to put in the video description and they just take up space. On my own website, I also have links to places like these Cambridge bibliographies or other free online sources, links to open source scholarly journals and other things like this, which are providing people with free online access to high quality academic resources and explaining how to go about finding reliable sources. For example, a lot of university departments, as you would know, have great reading lists for undergraduates, right? And
Yes.
these are a fantastic place to start because they're academically curated lists, especially talking about what the current scholarly consensus is and citing the latest work on the field, in the field, that kind of thing. I find those enormously helpful. And I think it's great to let people know, let our viewers know what's going on behind the scenes with our research, which is why I'm always interested in asking this question. Again, as I said to you earlier before we started, I think it's really important to help educate our viewers so that they can see what's going on and they can understand that, yeah, this is what we are doing. We actually have a process, a method, and they can use this to fact check other channels. They can actually see, wow, yeah, I mean, I can do some of this research myself and see if this channel is being accurate or something like that, which I think is really good. I think educating our viewers on good academic method, not that we need to be at the level where we can write peer-reviewed level scripts or anything like that, but that we are following a method. We're playing by the rules, as it were, right? Just like if you're a science communicator, sure, you're going to be simplifying, but you still need to play by the rules. You still need to be communicating science as opposed to pseudoscience. If you have an archaeology channel, you need to be playing by the rules. You need to be communicating archaeology rather than pseudo archaeology. And likewise, with us, we need to be communicating history rather than pseudo history. And in order to do that, you need to play by the rules. And in order to do that, you need to know what the rules are. And I think it's not just useful, but important for us to be transparent about that and to inform our audience so they feel empowered and they can view history channels more critically themselves.
I was going to say it's also important to keep in mind that, no history tuber or like educational YouTuber is, they don't just sit down and write scripts. Like you have to do a lot of research that is going to inform how you're going to approach the topic and how you're going to write that. And if
Right,
you're generating, and
absolutely.
if you're just AI generating something, there's no research process that's happening, or at least no research process that is going to leave a bibliography that can, or anything that you can verify. And yeah, I think that that's just, yeah, the lack of transparency, I think, is just, if you're going to use it to actually generate content, is just very, very problematic, very unethical. And also, I mean, I really enjoy the research and the writing. That's probably my favorite part of the entire process. So, I mean, just from my own personal enjoyment, wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to export that to anybody else. I don't trust AI to write the kind of scripts that I write. I'm not aware of any way that AI could contribute to my scripts. And the only other creators I know that have tried to use AI to like improve their scripts, maybe like shorten them a little bit, or, maybe organize them a bit better, they haven't been impressed with the results. Um, and now that Google has those AI overview in the search results, I can get a pretty good idea of what AI would write about a particular question. And when you're dealing with a complex topic, I mean, sometimes it gets it wrong. It often leaves out nuance or crucial details. I mean, just I wouldn't trust it unless you are making a video that is so generic, like just kind of giving very, very basic facts. I just don't see how I just don't see the utility of it. Now, if they ever make AI that can do all my sound editing flawlessly, I will welcome our new AI overlords. So that's something that there's potential there.
But I'd like to thank you so much for the time you've spent. And I really appreciate your contribution, not only to History YouTube as a community, but also in particular to educating your viewers and wanting them to understand more about this entire process and what goes on behind the scenes of a good History YouTube channel.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. It's been a pleasure.